Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I took this rocking chair and gave it an updated look for a customer. This rocking chair is very sentimental. This belonged to a customer who once used it herself and now wanted to regift it to a very special person in their life. However, before they could do that, they wanted to give it an updated look. With that in mind, I was super excited. But at the same time, I was a little nervous. And I felt honored that she trusted me with such a piece. But the pressure was on. I needed to ensure I did not mess this thing up. As you can tell, the chair is actually in really good condition. It had been in storage for a little bit, so deep cleaning was definitely needed, along with a couple areas that had some dings, but nothing that couldn't be fixed. And the reupholstering, that was a must. I had sent the customer a couple of inspiration pictures. She decided this was the look we were going for, a white frame with a light nude colored fabric. And all I had to do now was make it a reality. I started by cleaning the entire frame with soap and water, and I decided to disassemble the chair. Now, something worth mentioning: chairs are one of the most challenging pieces that I've ever worked on because they have all these little angles and nicks and crannies. And typically, I do not like to disassemble them, especially when I'm painting them. That small layer of paint can actually make it a little challenging to put back together, especially if they're in a really tight fit. But in this case, this chair had so many twists and turns that I felt I needed to disassemble this for it to be refinished correctly. The super challenging part of disassembling this chair was the seat and the back. These were glued to the point where I wasn't sure if I was going to even be able to separate them. But after a few minutes of fighting with it, like literally, at one point I had to I felt like I became Jackie Chan and I was like karate chopping this chair and I just didn't know what else to do. I was having a hard time and I just tried everything. It took me a little while, but finally, with a precision knife and a hammer and just a little bit of elbow grease, I was able to get this done. I'm now going to focus on the frame of the chair, and then I'm going to show you the process of reupholstering. If you want to jump this section and go directly to the reupholstering, I'll add a shortcut in the description below. But if you want to see the whole process, just hang on tight. I started off by sanding each piece with a 120 grit sandpaper. Because this was going to be painted, I just sanded it enough to remove the finishing coat and smooth it out if it had any rough spots. If I would have had stained the piece, then I would have had to sand this down completely to the natural wood, but not today. Today we are painting. Maybe another day I'll take that challenge on, but just not today. And after a couple of hours sanding down each piece, this is where we were. They had all been completely scuffed down, and now I needed to clean out any of the excess dust that it could accumulate. On a super side note, do you guys see the amount of dust on the side at the bottom left? Like, that's crazy. Something I didn't show you guys, but I probably should have, was I removed any excess fabric that was left on the frame. Those bigger pieces on the pile of dust, that's what that is. This is going to be very important when it comes to reassembling the chair so that when I put it in the frame, it's even, it's not bumpy, and it won't be offside. Remember how I mentioned there were a few areas that had some dings and needed to be repaired? I decided to use Bondo wood filler for these. I have been wanting to try this product out for a while, and this was the perfect project. It is very simple to use. You simply mix the wood filler with the hardening cream, and then you apply it to the areas that need to be fixed. The one thing that's important to note is that it does harden pretty quick. You have about a 1 to 2 minute time frame. So you want to move quickly, and you don't want to mix too much of the cream with the wood filler together because if not, it's just going to go to waste. Depending on the amount of Bondo used, it will take anywhere between 15 to about 30 minutes to dry. Mine took more like 30 minutes because it was a cooler day and it was a little bit more humid than usual. But no big deal. Once it was dried, I used a 220 grit sandpaper to smoothen out the wood filler areas, and then I just cleaned it with a wet rag. With all the prep work completed, it was time to start painting. I started off with an all purpose primer. I did use a roller to paint this. I have a paint gun, but it's not the best quality and it leaves a bunch of texture on the pieces that I've used it on. I have tried straining the paint, I have added water, and I just haven't found the right fix. I really think it's just the quality of the paint gun. I don't know, it might just be a user error as well. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll invest in a more user-friendly paint gun, which will help me with these type of pieces. But for now, I'm going to use a paint roller to get that nice, smooth finish I'm looking for. By the way, I am so sorry about the glare on the left side of the screen. Believe it or not, a bookshelf that I was refinishing fell over my phone. And for some miracle, the only thing that happened was a crack protective case for the camera. And the tripod also suffered a little bit, but to be honest, it was a good call. Something worse could have happened, and if this was the worst, I'm totally fine with it. Anyways, I didn't notice this happen until after the fact, so I do apologize for that. One thing worth mentioning is I did this in sections. Because I didn't want the paint to stick to the plastic, I painted one half of the piece, I would let that dry, then I would flip it over, and I would paint the other half of it. Then I sanded it down with the 220 grit sandpaper before moving on with painting it. I had four paint color options I was looking at: an off white, a bone white, an aged beige, and a frost. I simply applied small amounts to one of the pieces. Then I was going to compare it with the fabric that I had already selected for this project. Once I was done applying the samples, I simply placed it near the fabric and then I selected the one I liked the most. Definitely the two middle ones were a no go. They had too much of a yellow undertone. And between the outer ones, the one I liked the most was the one on the right, which was the frost color. And with my paint selection done, I started painting. I applied 2 layers of paint, lightly sanding with a 220 grit sandpaper in between each layer. Remember how at the beginning I mentioned that sometimes adding a layer of paint can make it a bit challenging to reassemble? It can also ruin the paint and the sealer if done incorrectly. I was a little bit nervous that this was going to be the case. So instead of sealing each individual piece, I decided to assemble it and then give it a touch up paint and sealing. Shout out to my aunt who was in town while I was finishing up this project. She really helped me with this reassembling and the reupholstering of the project. Off camera, we did a trial run trying to put it back together. I finally understood the Humpty Dumpty nursery rhyme. You know, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again. Goodness gracious, I felt like that with this rocking chair. But with the help of some pictures and my aunt, we succeeded. And with our Humpty Dumpty back together again, I added a third layer of paint and then I finish it off with sealing it with a polyurethane in a matte finish. I didn't forget to lightly sand with a 220 grit sandpaper in between each layer, and of course, cleaned off all the dust residue. While the polyurethane dried, I pivoted my focus to reupholstery. The first thing I needed to do was remove the old fabric. This was a bit of a challenge because it had both glue and staples holding it together. So the first thing I did was remove any of the areas that had glue using a precision knife. Then, using a flathead to loosen the staples a little bit and a staple remover, I removed all the staples. This is important so that when you put on the new staples, they don't overlap, and so there's no bumps in the back of the seat. Also, the old staples, you don't want those sticking out and poking people accidentally, so it's important to remove them. next step was to cut the fabric down to size. I used the original fabric as a guide. Using a pencil, I simply marked where I wanted to cut it. Then I cut it down to size. I simply centered this on the board, and using a staple gun, I began to secure it into place. I typically do one staple in the middle of each side, and then I start to tighten it along the sides. Once I get to the corners, that's where it takes a little bit more time to ensure that the corner is nice and smooth. Then I staple it into place. I ensure to remove all the excess fabric before placing the new piece either on the bottom or the back of the chair. Now, because this is something that's going to be seen on the back of the chair, it can't be stapled into place. Instead, I had to cut this down to the exact measurement. And using Gorilla Clear adhesive, I adhered it onto the back and set it in place. Final touches. I like to use fabric protector to create a water repellent and stain resistant barrier against any spills, especially with a light color fabric like this one. With all the pieces completed, all that needed to be done was to put it back together. To secure the seat and the back onto the chair frame, I used the same clear Gorilla adhesive and applied pressure using some furniture clamps. And with that, we were done. We took this lovely chair that was going to be passed down to the next generation, which made it huge sentimental value, and transformed it into a beautiful modern rocking chair perfect for a nursery. I was so happy with how this ended up, and so was the customer. It was such an honor and pleasure to help her bring this rocking chair back to its prime. Shout out to everyone who's helped me with my pieces. My niece, who you can see on some of the clips, she loves helping me out and she's so cute when she does it. Also to my aunt who was in town and helped me. I don't think I could have reassembled this chair without her help. So I really appreciate it. I'll make sure to add a list of materials that I used in the description below. And as per usual, before you guys leave, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel. This way you don't miss out on any future projects and you'll support me throughout this journey. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys next time here at Angie's Crafts Furniture Renovation. Bye!